West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary story. Looking into the leaks connected to the Russia investigation from Attorney General Barr and the Justice Department. According to the New York Times, the Justice Department, first under Jeff Sessions, subpoenaed Apple in 2017 and early 2018 for the data of at least a dozen people tied to the House Intelligence Committee, including the top Democrat Adam Schiff. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell also confirms to NBC News his records were seized. The Times reports the records of aides and family members of those connected to the committee also were collected, including those of a minor. No evidence was ever found tying the committee to the leaks. But that did not stop Trump's next Attorney General, William Barr, from reviving the investigation a year later. The Times, citing three sources, reports Barr recruited about a half dozen investigators to work on that case. After years of nothing to show for that investigation, the Times reports some in the department began to see it as politically motivated. You think? Barr declined to comment, as did the Biden Justice Department. Congressman Adam Schiff now is calling on the agency's inspector general to investigate.
That is, I think, a terrible abuse of power. It violates, I think, the separation of powers, but it also makes the Department of Justice just a fully owned subsidiary of the president's personal legal interests and political interests. And that does such damage to the department. So it's extraordinary, maybe unprecedented, for the department to seek records like this of a member of Congress or staff of a member of Congress or staff of a committee, to do so in a partisan way, to do so when they're investigating him, to do so openly calling on his department. It's hard to express just how shocking an abuse of power this really is.
So, Joe, what you have here, and we're going to talk to Michael Schmidt in just a moment, one of the reporters from the New York Times on this, is the former attorneys general, both Jeff Sessions and then William Barr, basically assembling a cavalry to go and look inside the Intelligence Committee to see who they thought might be leaking stories to outlets like the New York Times and using subpoena power to do so.
I mean, this seems awfully extraordinary, this news that we're waking up to this morning, and perhaps it's happened before, and maybe those examples just aren't coming to mind. But here you have an administration, and there's really a parallel with the clip that we played coming in, where you had people shocked and stunned that Joe Biden suggested that Donald Trump is going to try to steal the election if things didn't go his way. Of course, that's exactly what happened. Here, you actually had Donald Trump and everybody around Trump, all of his defenders, screaming and howling about how the, quote, deep state had been spying on them during the transition. At the same time, they're literally spying on members of the press. They're spying on partisan political opponents. And this is what this is what seems new to me. Spying on political rivals in another branch of government. I mean, there's a reason why we have three separate branches of government, and there are checks and balances. And so you actually have Donald Trump's White House, Donald Trump's Justice Department spying on a separate branch of government that's conducting its oversight role in investigating the executive branch. And like I said, maybe this has happened before. I don't remember this ever happening. If it has happened, we don't want to engage in being too melodramatic here. But my God, it just seems to me that this is an extraordinary breach. It is a constitutionally challenging event. Again, when an executive branch spies on a legislative branch committee that's doing investigations and oversight on that president. Let's bring in one of the reporters of this story, New York Times reporter and MSNBC national security analyst, Michael Schmidt. He's the author of the great book, Donald Trump versus the United States, Inside the Struggle to Stop a President. And we should note that Michael was one of the several New York Times reporters who had his own record subpoenaed by the Trump Justice Department. So Michael, we obviously last week expressed concerns about you and other members of the press having their records sifted through by government agencies on leak investigations. That had happened before. It's happened before. It happened also during the Obama administration. They were very aggressive. I'm trying to remember, though, whether we've ever had a president and his administration spy on members. I'm sure if Nixon didn't do it, he certainly thought about it, but actually spy and seize the records of opponents from another branch that was investigating that president and his administration. This seems like extraordinarily dangerous and new. I'm sort of stammering around this morning because I just think this is new territory.
No, I think you're right. And as we found in our reporting, we could not find a similar example of this in recent memory. Now, this could have happened in a leak case that we don't know about. There are lots of leaks that are investigated, and there are lots of tactics that are used in them. So in another matter, sure, maybe this did happen, but we certainly didn't find out about it. So that sets this apart. You're right. It is different than the subpoenas that we've seen over the years for reporters' phone records. By the way, a tactic now that the Biden Justice Department says they will not follow, even though they were following it up until about a week ago. The thing I think that also sets this apart, certainly in terms of Congress, is that this is exactly what Trump wanted. And this is exactly why presidents are counseled not to talk about ongoing investigations or about how the powers of the Justice Department should be used. Because if something like this were to come out, the first instinct of everyone is to say, well, that's exactly what Donald Trump, who was the president, who was the person who could put whoever he wanted at the Justice Department, who at the time was putting all of his pressure on that Justice Department. You have to remember, this is 2017, 2018. Trump is very angry about the Mueller investigation. Sessions and Rosenstein are afraid they're going to get fired at any turn because they're trying, Rosenstein is saying he's trying to protect Mueller and the Mueller investigation. And it is in that atmosphere that this happens, that the Justice Department takes this extraordinary action to pull go to Apple and get the records, the data and information, iCloud information for one of the president's chief rivals, the staff of that rival, and a child for one of the staff members.
It's really unbelievable. And Willie, this is also the same time when Donald Trump kept telling anybody who would listen to him, that is my Justice Department. That is the Trump Justice Department. I can do whatever he want. He said he could do whatever he wanted to do, and obviously he chose to use that Justice Department to spy on political opponents in another branch of government.
Yeah, and time and again, the Justice Department was all too willing to play that role for President Trump. And Michael, I'm interested if we can take a step back in what the Justice Department was looking for specifically. Okay, you go to Apple, you say, give us these records, give us the metadata. What did they think they were going to find, number one? And there's another compelling piece, part of the story, where you say Apple had a gag order from the Justice Department until just recently, a month or so ago, which is why we're learning from a lot of media outlets about what exactly happened. And also, a couple of months ago was the first time that these members of Congress themselves learned that they had their records subpoenaed because the gag order finally expired on Apple.
So for the Justice Department to have received the gag order in this matter, they very likely had to have a federal judge sign off on that. And that's part of this that I think has received less attention, which is that the judicial branch had some role here. And, you know, the Justice Department was obviously the one going out and doing this, but that the judicial branch allowed the Justice Department to keep this secret. That's why we didn't know about it until the past few weeks, where these subpoenas and this action has trickled out. And in that case, certainly, for example, in the case of the attempts to get my and my colleagues' information from our email, it was only our general counsel who knew about it for the first several weeks, because the court would not allow him to tell anyone. And eventually he received the permission to tell a few people at the Times, but he could not even tell the editor of the New York Times, Dean Baquet. He only found out about this a week ago as this was all becoming public. So the Justice Department was allowed to operate in secrecy in this, which they say was necessary to protect these ongoing investigations, because people could try and destroy evidence if they knew that the feds were moving. But also, when things operate in secret, there's a lot less scrutiny. It's a lot easier to hide from the media and others who will question, why are you doing this and what is truly behind that? And it looks like that tactic, that approach was used in regards to Schiff and the others on the Hill.
It is Friday, the 11th of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and you know, you deserve it. Only if you're a happy drunk. Do not do it if you're not a happy drunk. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to you or the people around you, whether you know them or not. So, yeah, made it to Friday, and even though the world is going to hell in a handbasket, there's always family problems that intrude upon trying to save America from this Nazi takeover. Yep, well, I don't know if I want to burden you with the family issues, but let's just put it out there that some families are tough. Some of them are pretty darn tough. And when you're caring for an elderly parent, it can be really tough. If, they're contrarian to begin with, because it's almost like having a lobotomy. I'm finding out that whatever your temperament is or was during the course of your life, that when you become old, then it's like you get locked in to whatever that emotional fugue was through all those years. And then it exaggerates. So, hopefully you don't have parents like that. You know, my dad's not, I gotta say. Dad's rather, shall we say, jovial. A happy cherub kind of guy. So, we are having major problems in the world, and these minor issues of family, because really what does it entail? disagreements over cleaning solutions. Whether one should go a counterclockwise or clockwise wipe on the counter. I mean, I don't know. Whatever it is that causes someone to be upset, they'll be upset about. Okay. Well, we have major problems. Is Garland going to just put a garland on whatever the Trump administration did and just, we'll erect a statue? Maybe even name a military base after him. What is it about this whole process that we have? John Mitchell went to jail for doing tremendous. Well, I don't know. I was going to say doing a lot less. I think they're running neck and neck, shall we say? The Barr and Sessions DOJ. Let's not forget that. Sessions did recuse himself because of the Russian involvement. Let's not forget that either. And that really pissed Trump off. And why? Because Trump put him there because you had involvement with the Russians. I mean, I got dirt on you. And Sessions did decide to be more of an institutionalist in that matter. Spying on journalists and others and members of the Intel Committee. Over leaks? No, it wasn't over leaks. Anyway, let's finish up with Sessions and his Russian involvement. Because Sessions knew that if any digging was to be had, that the whole house of cards, I would call them Kremlin cards, would fall. And so would a lot of heads. And they've staved this off. And for some reason, this DOJ thinks, well, they were in the institutional aspects of our institution, doing the institutional things to be able to break down all of our safeguards, but it was institutional, so we have to save the institution so it can happen again. No, so it will not happen again. We found out that our democracy is so fragile, it's only held together by a handshake, an agreement. If you have one party who refuses to live in the rational world and is contrarian at odds with everything, when you've worked your butt off and they say you haven't done a thing, when you've tried to make sure that people are living in there accusing you of murdering people, when you're trying to get clean water, and that's not what we're going to get. Forget clean water. You don't get clean water. You get lead in your water. Wow, almost sounds like family. Anyway, how do you keep a democracy intact when reason and rationality is just thrown out the window? You take a vaccine and now you're magnetized. Electeds believe that somehow we have the ability to change the course of the moon to stop climate change. What? I just, it boggles. And we're supposed to take those people seriously and deal with them as reasonable, rational adults. Now, I don't want to be too harsh, but this dissonance, this mental limitation, okay, let me be lazy and just say it's crazy, permeates so much of our society. I would posit at least 73 million have been touched. So, I mentioned before we have our work cut out for us. Yes, we do indeed. And I've always been positive about everything. It keeps me going. Not like The Secret. Oh, God, The Secret kind of pisses me off. Oh, any kind of unhappiness that you have is your fault. Okay, thanks. Thanks for helping. I'm not talking about sitting around and whining. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about avoidance. But the wear and tear of this unreasonable part of our society, the debilitating effects of being gaslit every inch of the way. And it's seeped into the lowest levels of every aspect of our society, right down into the family unit. Magnetism. Give me a break. And people are believing it. They're putting stuff on themselves and it's falling off. And they go, see, it's stuck. Any questions? Explain that. Okay. I don't know. There's an explanation why it could stick for a little bit. Surface tension. You ever heard of that? Jeez. Get a little bit of water there, warm it up. It's going to happen. But when things are falling off, when they're saying it's sticking, and then they look at you in all seriousness and say, explain that. Well, it fell off. And then they yell at you, no, it didn't. What do? Do you yell? Do you just ignore it? Yelling apparently doesn't work very well. If you ignore it, things just keep getting worse. So sometimes hard decisions are needed, have to be made. And with that stated, why don't we get into what's on the rest of the menu? I was being sort of metaphorical there. I was like speaking about a few different levels of meaning. Anyway, that Trump Barr Department of Justice spying on Democratic members of the Intel Committee, their families and staff. The GOP is so criminal. They don't even think anything's wrong with that. But I will posit that the majority of America does. It's just that we also have about 73 million who think that you could change the orbit of the moon. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Maybe we need to give them a gated community in Idaho, wall off Idaho so we can keep them in. And, I don't know, let them have at it. They want to live in Lord of the Flies. I think Idaho might be a nice place. There's a lot of people in Idaho that wish that wouldn't happen. I know. I'm sorry. You can move to Oregon. It's not nearly as bad. Well, close. Anyway, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, drink. The GOP is misleading on why homicides are up. Yeah. Everything else is down, but homicides are up. And they'll blame the Democratic members that have tried to make equal rights for everybody. They'll blame black and brown people, everything. But, we're a society awash in guns. You would expect homicides to be up when you have, you can open carry without even having a permit, and you don't even have to take a class. Oh, you beat and killed your previous 3 wives? Go ahead. Here, have a gun. No wonder homicides are up. But yeah, we know what the GOP is misleading about because they are racist Nazis, and they think that they can make it work again. And I don't know, maybe they will. The Oregon House of Representatives expelled a Republican member who let violent far-right seditionists into the state capitol last December. And 2 neo-Nazi group members who were secretly recorded by the FBI plotting a terrorist attack pleaded guilty to federal gun charges and obstruction of justice. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Pakistani police arrested a cleric over threats to Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai. And Russia fined Facebook and Telegram for banned content. But it was not immediately clear what type of content the platforms failed to take down. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, across the page, to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds to us once a month, we throw that into a kitty with what we have in our own wallets. And that allows us to pay our bills, which then allows us to fly under the radar and continue this resistance that we have been resisting, well, this Nazi takeover of America. But we have been resistance broadcasting for 10 years now. And it is because of folks like you who have allowed us to fulfill our civic duty in doing so. So thank you very much for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media platforms like Twitter. And let's see, maybe another 7 days, about a week or so, I'll be able to do it on Facebook again. Hey, I guess Facebook is finding out what it feels like. We'll have a story about Russia and Facebook. Yeah, right there at the chef's table. But hey, maybe Zuckerberg knows what it's like to be suspended finally. Well, he's being fined. I guess that's different. Anyway, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, let's tuck in to this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Though the liquid diet of the French 77 is the premier menu item in the salon today, there are other tidbits of the edible rather than quaffing kind. Just, I don't know, we used to say when I was a young kid, when I say young kid, I mean in my early 20s when it was legal to drink. We used to say, well, it just soaks up the alcohol. If you eat something, it soaks up the alcohol. Yeah, sort of. I think the alcohol's already been metabolized and in your brain. So I think what the food does is, get you a little bit of other nutrients and leach out the alcohol in your brain. Drink water. That's even a better thing. But nonetheless, here in the salon, we do have an hors d'oeuvre platter. It's right over there. Have fun. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by David Klepper and Gary Fields of the Associated Press. Skyrocketing murder rates claim the National Fraternal Order of Police, an explosion of violent crime, said Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Democrat-run cities across the country who cut funding for police have seen increases in crime, tweeted U.S. Rep. Patrick McHenry. He's a repug from North Carolina. On social media and in political speeches, some Republicans and pro-police groups say last year's calls to slash spending on law enforcement have led to a dramatic rise in killings in cities overseen by Democrats. All right, AP. Democrats, you're going to continue with that? All right, I hear you. Now, the increases they cite are real, and several big cities did make cuts to police spending, but the reductions were mostly modest, and the same big increases in homicides are being seen nationwide, even in cities that increased police spending. At the same time, the rates for burglaries, drug offenses, and many other types of crime are down in many cities across the country. I wonder what's the difference between these other crimes and homicides. I wonder what is the one component that might cause an increase in homicides. Now, we've already seen it's not from defunding the police, because no police department has been defunded. We see that it's not because of those commies running the cities. Because it looks like it's happening in the Nazi cities, too, if you want to look at it that way. Now, the effort to blame Democrats for crime may offer a preview of the Republican strategy for upcoming elections. There you have it. A new twist on the old law and order argument from the party's past. Harkening back to President Richard Nixon. The darkies are going to come to your town in buses and kill you in your sleep. Antifa Black Lives Matter is coming in busloads into your little town. They're going to take our white culture away. I would argue there's no such thing as white culture. I mean, come on, unseasoned chicken. Have you seen the common interior design? There's no culture in white culture. I have more to say about that later. Just as it did half a century ago, the argument ignores the complicated reasons for fluctuations in crime rates. A list that today includes the upheaval wrought by the coronavirus pandemic and protests that erupted after the killing of George Floyd by police. Well, I'd also say that it might have something to do with just giving guns out to anybody and everyone. Andrew Selsky of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republican lawmakers voted with majority Democrats in the Oregon House of Representatives to take the historic step of expelling a Republican member who let violent far-right protesters into the state capitol on December 21st. I would say they were more like seditious insurgents rather than protesters, but that's just me. Legislators said on the House floor that this could be the most important vote they ever cast. They then proceeded last night, Thursday, to expel an unapologetic Representative Mike Neerman with a 59-1 vote, marking the first time a member has been expelled by the House in its 160-year history. The only vote against the resolution for expulsion was Neerman's own. Representative Paul Holvey, a Democrat who chaired the committee that earlier Thursday unanimously recommended Neerman's expulsion, reminded lawmakers of the events of December 21st, which were an eerie foreshadowing, I think it was a dress rehearsal, of the much more serious January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol. And Oregon State Capitol was not the only one. It was only one of dozens. On the morning of December 21st, and this is Paul Hovey, the Democrat, who committee chair, on the morning of December 21st, a couple hundred protesters, some of them heavily armed and wearing body armor, arrived at the Capitol for a protest with the intent of illegally entering and presumably occupying the building and interrupt the proceedings of the Oregon legislature, Holvey said. Staff and legislators were terrified. We can only speculate what would have happened if they were able to get all the way in. Neerman said he let the protesters in because he believes the Capitol, which has been closed to the public to protect against the spread of the coronavirus, should have been open. The assault happened during the peak of the pandemic. But even Republicans, who are often bitterly opposed to Democratic initiatives on climate change and some other bills, said the crowd outside the Capitol that day was not made up of constituents who wanted to peacefully engage in the democratic process. Some were carrying guns. Some shouted false QAnon conspiracy theories about Democrats killing babies. They carried American flags, banners for former President Donald Trump, and a sign calling for the arrest of Democratic Governor Kate Brown. They broke windows and assaulted journalists. Nobody should have opened the door to the people who were here that day, said Representative Daniel Bonham, a Republican and a member of Holvey's special committee. The final straw for Republican House members came on June 4th when video emerged showing Neerman choreographing how he would let protesters into the Capitol a few days before it actually happened. For his fellow lawmakers, that was proof it was a premeditated act, which Neerman acknowledged. All 22 of his fellow House Republicans wrote him on Monday, strongly recommending he resign. As lawmakers gathered to decide Neerman's fate, a few dozen people waving American flags and one carrying a sign saying, "I am Mike Neerman," gathered outside the Capitol. One reportedly kicked a metal door, sending booms through a marble hallway of the building. Neerman was seen on security video opening a door to protesters on December 21st as lawmakers met in emergency session to deal with economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. Protesters barged into the building, which was closed to the public because of safety protocols, got into shoving matches with police, and sprayed officers with bear spray. It was a dress rehearsal, folks. It's impossible to overstate the seriousness of the reason we are here today, Holvey said during the committee hearing. Representative Neerman helped armed, violent protesters to enter the Capitol, breaching the security of the Capitol, which was officially closed to the public, and also endangered the authorized staff and legislators inside the building. Hundreds of people provided written testimony to House Special Committee on December 21st, 2020, which was composed of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Some who testified excoriated Neerman as a seditionist. Others praised him for letting people into the Capitol, saying residents should be allowed to attend even though hearings are live-streamed on video. House Speaker Tina Kotek credited riot police who finally pushed out the December 21st protesters with preventing a full-scale assault. Neerman also faces 2 misdemeanor criminal charges, and he has defiantly said he will seek a trial by jury. Michael Kunzelman of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. 2 neo-Nazi group members whose talk of planning an attack at a Virginia gun rights rally was secretly recorded by the FBI pleaded guilty yesterday, Thursday, to gun charges. Former Canadian Armed Forces Reservist Patrick Jordan Matthews, U.S. Army veteran Brian Mark Lemley Jr., and a third member of the base were arrested on federal charges in Maryland ahead of the January 2020 rally at Virginia's Capitol in Richmond. Matthews, age 28, and Lemley, 35, pleaded guilty at separate hearings to charges, including illegally transporting a firearm and obstruction of justice. They destroyed cell phones when FBI agents raided their apartment. The third co-defendant, William Garfield Bilbrough IV, was sentenced to 5 years in prison after pleading guilty in December to helping Matthews illegally enter the U.S. from Canada in 2019. After our prosecutor read aloud a summary of the case against them, the judge asked them the same question. Did you do the things the government said you did? Matthews and Lemley both replied that they did. Matthews pleaded guilty to 4 counts that carry a combined total of 50 years in prison. Lemley pleaded guilty to 7, punishable by a maximum of 70 years. However, in both cases, federal sentencing guidelines likely will recommend a prison sentence that is significantly lower than the statutory maximum. Oh, you mean kind of like a Burger King Whopper with cheese, and they'll be on their way. U.S. District Judge Theodore Chong, who is not bound by the guidelines, is scheduled to sentence Matthews and Lemley on October 28. None of the defendants face terrorism-related charges, and a stipulation of facts signed by Matthews, Lemley, and prosecutors did not mention the Richmond rally. But prosecutors are reserving the right to seek a so-called terrorism enhancement at sentencing that could lead to a significant increase in the prison term if the judge agrees to apply it. Matthews and Lemley, who lived in Elkton, Maryland, discussed the planning of violence at the Richmond rally, where thousands of gun rights activists later gathered peacefully to protest gun control legislation. Investigators installed a closed-circuit television camera and microphone inside a Newark, Delaware apartment that Matthews and Lemley shared for several months after Matthews left Canada. The surveillance equipment captured Lemley and Matthews discussing the next civil war erupting in Virginia and talking about committing targeted acts of violence. And the prosecutors said that in a January 21 court filing. I need to claim my first victim, Lemley said, according to prosecutors. The talk of violence prompted Matthews to say, I'm worried we're going to become psychopaths. Well, Bilbrough, 21, of Denton, Maryland, participated in early discussions about traveling to Richmond, but had tried to distance himself from the group shortly before his arrest. Among other white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups, the base has been a leading proponent of accelerationism, a fringe philosophy that advocates using mass violence to hasten society's collapse. Members often communicated in encrypted chat rooms and attended military-style training camps. The Guardian identified the base's founder as American-born Ronaldo Nazzaro, who formed the group in 2018 using the pseudonym Norman Spear and was believed to be living in Russia. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed that Nazzaro worked for the agency from 2004 to 2006. The case against the 3 men charged in Maryland was part of a broader investigation of the base. In January 2020, authorities in Georgia and Wisconsin arrested 4 other men linked to the group. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. We humans often navigate using road signs and GPS. Elephants, though, they can navigate over long distances using their incredible memories. An elephant never forgets, right?
But it's also been suggested here and there that maybe olfaction and their exceptional sense of smell is what's critical in these long-distance movements.
Connie Allen is a behavioral ecologist at the University of Exeter in the UK. She and her colleagues investigated that idea by testing African elephants' ability to tune in on a very specific smell, urine. You see, elephants pee a lot, up to 15 gallons a day, and that urine can contain an array of chemical cues. But first, to test all this, the researchers needed some pee. So they headed to a spot along Botswana's Boteti River and waited.
We would wait for elephants to urinate and within 20 minutes go and collect these fresh urine samples.
Then they set up camera traps on 7 elephant trails. You can actually hear an elephant brushing against a bush here. After observing the elephant's natural behavior on those paths, they noticed that a majority of them investigated scents along the trail, especially elephants traveling alone. And that's an indication, the researchers say, that scents may serve as signposts along the trail. Next, they placed those urine samples they'd gathered along the trails, and they found that for at least 2 days, passing elephants trained their trunks on the samples, especially samples from mature adults. That's another indication that scent might be a potent navigational cue. Their findings appear in the journal Animal Behavior. And based on these results, they hope conservationists might be able to use elephant pee as a decoy.
If we can trick elephants into thinking the path of other elephants is going this way, maybe we can redirect them away from at the moment where they are coming into conflict with humans.
They'll just have to see what happens once elephants get a whiff of that plan. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I can't breathe, sir. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. These all too familiar words were the last ones spoken to police officers by 33-year-old Manuel Ellis in Tacoma, Washington on March 3, 2020, 3 weeks before the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Tacoma police officers tasered, handcuffed, and hogtied Ellis, put a spit hood over his head, hit him repeatedly, and held him down so that he could not breathe. At the end of May 2021, 2 of the police officers involved were charged with second-degree murder, and a third was charged with first-degree manslaughter. The local medical examiner, who noted Ellis's enlarged heart and methamphetamine intoxication as contributing factors, classified Ellis's death as a homicide, attributing that death to lack of oxygen caused by the police. The Tacoma Police Union characterized the criminal charges as a, quote, politically motivated witch hunt, and the officers as fine public servants, and predicted acquittal. There is this evidence with which the defendant officers will need to contend. Manuel Ellis repeatedly told the cops, "I can't breathe, sir," and those words were captured by a home security camera, as was one of the officers' response. "Shut the up, man." It's only the beginning stage of the criminal prosecution, but we can say this much with certainty. At least in some jurisdictions, death at the hands of the police will be investigated and prosecuted. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day workers at the Dodge truck plant in Warren, Michigan, went out on a wildcat strike. Workers were fed up with the endless attacks from management and disappointing contract negotiations the year before. Wildcat strikes had become almost commonplace in Detroit area auto plants the previous summer. Arbitrary discipline, deteriorating working conditions, and frustration with the union's response all led to the three-day walkout. 10 days earlier, 100 workers had staged a sit-in over working conditions. When the company threatened firings, more workers dropped their tools. Now, 4 had been fired, including the second shift chief steward. The response was immediate. Within an hour, the plant was virtually shut down. 6,000 workers voted to continue the strike. Wildcat leaders noted that virtually all the routine antagonisms among workers, young versus old, black versus white, women versus men, had melted away in solidarity. Socialist and anarchist workers in the plant published their recollections in a commemorative pamphlet entitled Wildcat, Dodge Truck, June 1974. In it, they state, quote, "We were excited by the collective decision of thousands of Chrysler employees to deny the authority of daily wage labor and, for even 4 days, to say no to the demands of the alarm clock, the production line, bosses, union bureaucrats, judges, and cops. It was, in fact, a total frustration with and rejection of all the things inside and outside the plant which exercise control over our lives." By the time it was over, 30 strikers had been arrested. Strike leaders were branded as communist agitators by the union, and area judges issued injunctions to end the picketing. The Wildcat may have failed, but workers had pushed back against management offensives.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 52 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high of 62, which is much cooler than what we had yesterday, and it was pretty cool yesterday as well. And it looks like rain with about 1/3 of an inch throughout the day. Winds light and variable. Rainfall near 1/3 of an inch. And then showers early tonight with some clearing overnight. Lows in the low 50s. Winds light and variable. Looks like something less than, something over 1/10, but less than 1/4. And intervals of clouds tomorrow, Saturday, with a high in 78, the upper 70s. Oh, wow. So sunshine in the morning with more clouds for later in the day. Winds out of the west-southwest will be picking up at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 11,378, and deceased remains at 146. Grass pollen is rated very high here in Rogue River proper, yes, indeed, and the air quality index remains good for the region at 31 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at 9, even though we have a considerable cloud cover, so do take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.99 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 69%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 74 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 80 degrees and fair. Rome is 83 and fair. Kyiv is 74 and fair. Kabul is 86 and fair but with wind. Hong Kong is 80 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 71 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 51 and clear. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and partly cloudy with a fog advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Khan of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Pakistani police have arrested a cleric after a video of him went viral on social media in which he threatens Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai over her recent comments about marriage. The cleric, Mufti Sadar Ali-Haqqani, was arrested in Lakhmarat, a district in the northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province on Wednesday, said Wasim Sajid, a local police chief. In the video, the cleric threatens to target Malala with a suicide attack when she returns to Pakistan, allegedly because of her comments earlier this month to British Vogue magazine about marriage that he claims insulted Islam. Yousafzai has been living in Britain since 2012 after the Pakistani Taliban shot and seriously wounded her. She was just 15 at the time and had enraged the Taliban with her campaign for girls' education. At one point in the Vogue interview, Malala says, "I still don't understand why people have to get married. If you want to have a person in your life, why do you have to sign marriage papers? Why can't it just be a partnership?" The remark caused a stir on social media in Pakistan and angered Islamists and clerics like Haqqani. Under Islamic law, couples cannot live together outside marriage. Malala's father, Zudan Yousafzai, defended her on Twitter, saying her remarks were taken out of context. Malala, now 23, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 for working to protect children from slavery, extremism, and child labor. She briefly visited Pakistan in 2018. She remains highly popular in Pakistan, but is also widely criticized by Islamists and hardliners. In February, Malala's 2012 attacker threatened a second attempt on her life, tweeting that next time there would be no mistake. The threat prompted Yousafzai to tweet herself, asking both the Pakistani military and Prime Minister to explain how her shooter had escaped from government custody. He was arrested in 2017, but escaped in January of 2020 from a so-called safe house where he was being held by Pakistani intelligence. The circumstances of both his arrest and escape have been shrouded in mystery and controversy.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russian authorities ordered Facebook and the messaging app Telegram to pay steep fines for failing to remove banned content, a move that could be part of growing government efforts to tighten control over social media platforms amid political dissent. A Moscow court fined Facebook a total of roughly $236,000 US and Telegram $139,000 US. It was not immediately clear what type of content the platforms failed to take down. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.